Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all the shows in your favorite venues like Deftones at Madison Square Garden, Eagles at the Sphere, and Foster the People at the Ryman Auditorium. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.
The holidays are here, and so is the IKEA winter sale. Now's your chance to make the holidays a little more magical and less expensive. Save up to 50% off on select items in-store and online now through January 7th. Plus, IKEA loyalty members get an extra 10% off on sale items. And if you spend $2.99 or more on a single order before December 10th, enjoy free delivery. Offer valid in the U.S. through 1/7 while supplies last. Selection may vary by store and online. See store and IKEA-USA.com/winter sale for complete terms. Restrictions apply.
For years after the unsolved murder of Kanika Powell, it looked like the police had no clues and no leads. But recently released information gives us a peek into an early tip that may crack open this case. I'm Charlie, and welcome to Crimelines. Hello, and welcome to Crimelines. In today's bonus episode, we are going to be focusing on the murder of Kanika Powell, but we are also going to touch on another murder that happened, and that is of Shan Green. Though the authorities are not sold on the cases being connected, they are often discussed together because of some of the similarities that we'll get into. I covered both of these cases on my old podcast years and years ago, and it was much the same information you would hear on any coverage about this case before 2023. What is different now is that the official Unsolved Mysteries podcast covered the case, and the investigators and family publicized information that had not, up to that point, been released. Some of the information includes an early tip that came in and the possible physical description of the killer. I mean, it's a vague description, but it's more than we had before. But to get to that new information, we have to start at the beginning with Kanika Powell. She was born in January of 1980 to a single mother, Judy Powell Forrest. And Judy said that Kanika was a very fun child to raise. She was feisty and adorable. And eventually, the family expanded to include 3 more siblings, as well as Judy's new husband, David. Kanika and Judy were very close, and it's almost silly for me to even state this, because you're going to hear it for yourself. This entire case is, this happened, and then Kanika called her mom. That happened, and then Kanika called her mom. Judy was Kanika's go-to support person, and what a compliment to Judy and her parenting. After Kanika graduated high school, she worked for a bit before she decided to enlist in the military. Judy told Crime Watch Daily that she was worried about how Kanika would do in basic training because she wasn't a physically active or particularly athletic person, but when Kanika wanted to do something, she did it. While away in the service, Kanika got some adult perspective on things, and she wrote Judy an apology letter for all of her teenage antics, though by all reports, whatever she did wasn't that bad. She was mostly opinionated, the way teenagers can be. Kanika finished her military career while she was stationed in Korea and then came home to the D.C. area. She first joined Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, working as a security contractor in 2004, and then in 2006, her position was made permanent. And that's about all I can say about her job. What lab did she work in? I don't know, that's classified information. What exactly did she do there? Also classified. Kanika's family knew she worked in security, and sometimes she had to travel for work, and the work had something to do with the military. That is all they knew. At the time Kanika worked there was something like 400 Homeland Security projects being worked on in the lab, so you can see why it was top secret and we're not allowed that information. Things seemed to be going along just like normal for Kanika in the summer of 2008. She went to work, she came home to her Laurel, Maryland apartment, and sometimes she went out with her close friends, mostly people she knew since high school. For years, the same line had also been repeated in this case. Kanika had no angry exes and no boyfriend in the picture. And so all of us podcasters covering the case reported that she wasn't in a relationship in the summer of 2008. But that turned out to not entirely be true. The key word here, boyfriend. Kanika was bisexual. This was not something she hid, but she was also not putting up pride flags all over her social media. And the only reason I'm coming out and stating that she was bisexual is because it really does speak to our heteronormative thinking that when we hear a woman doesn't have a boyfriend, we go, oh, she must not be in a relationship. And I am someone who is not very heteronormative in my thinking in general, yet I still did that. So anyway, just me over here exploring my own biases that have nothing to do with what we're talking about. So back on topic. In the summer of 2008, Kanika did meet some new people that she was hanging out with that were outside of her usual friend group. According to the Unsolved Mysteries podcast, Kanika and one woman in the group were seeing each other. I'm going to call her Melissa as her name has not been released, and calling her that woman just feels disrespectful. Kanika was pretty private about all of her relationships, whether they were with men or women, and since this was a new one, even her friends didn't really know a ton of details. We don't know how serious things were, but we do know that Kanika's mother, Judy, did meet Melissa. Judy told Unsolved Mysteries that she talked to her a few times and found her to be warm, and there were no red flags. Kanika and Melissa were planning a trip to Atlanta for the last weekend in August. They were going to attend the Atlanta Black Gay Pride Festival, which is held Labor Day weekend every year. 6 days before they were supposed to go, on Saturday, August 23rd, 2008, 28-year-old Kanika Powell was home alone when there was a knock at her door around 7 p.m. We know what happened, not just because Kanika called her mother and told her about it, but because she emailed friends and colleagues to warn them about this type of ruse to get women who were home alone to open their doors. Kanika wrote that a man knocked on her door and she asked who it was. She got no answer, so she looked out the peephole. She did not recognize him, so she asked again, who was he? He said he was from the FBI and he was looking for Kanika Powell in regards to an investigation. She said he did hold up some type of law enforcement looking badge to the peephole, but there was no picture ID. She told him that she didn't know what he was talking about and he would need some documentation before she'd speak to him. At this, the man left, and she watched him walk away towards the rental office while he was carrying something in his hand that looked like a folder or a large envelope. Kanika wrote in her email that she heard a second voice tell him to walk in the opposite direction, so she thought that there were at least 2 men involved in this. Kanika then called the FBI about the visit, and she said that they told her that it was very likely bogus. Agents don't usually go to the door solo. He would have had someone else with him, and if you don't answer the door or talk to them, they always leave behind a business card for you to contact them again, which he didn't do. Kanika then called the local police to give them this man's description in case this was something bigger, like some guy out there preying on women who were living alone. And the only place I have seen any description of this man released was the Unsolved Mysteries podcast episode, which of course will be listed in my sources. And Kanika said that this was a black male wearing a black hat, black framed glasses, and a black North Face jacket. A North Face jacket in Maryland in August. Kanika had also said there was a red car that zipped out of the complex shortly after this, and she thought it might be connected to the guy at her door, but she didn't know. The police did send someone out to check to see if there was anyone prowling around the apartment complex, but they didn't see anyone. They told Kanika that they'd increase patrols in the area, and Kanika also let the rental office know about this incident so they could keep an eye out. Kanika wrote in the email to her friends that she didn't sleep for the rest of the weekend, and she was going to work on getting an alarm system set up in her apartment. She had one in the last apartment, but hadn't gotten around to transferring it over yet. While everything about this guy at her door freaked her out, she was specifically rattled by one detail. He knew her name. And that would freak me out too, because it's not like he was just trying to get entry into whatever apartment would open their door to him. He was specifically trying to get her to open her door, which feels targeted. The email Kanika sent to her friends obviously alarmed them, and she had some people offer for her to come stay with them instead of staying in her apartment alone. But Kanika figured she'd be fine. She'll just take some extra precautions, like not opening her door to strangers. And so she didn't open her door when, on Wednesday, August 27th, she got another knock. It was after work around 7 or 7:30 in the evening. Like with the first incident, Kanika just spoke to the person from behind the closed door. This man asked if she was Kanika Powell, saying that he had a package for her, and she told him to just leave it at the door. But he said he needed her to sign for it. She told him she didn't order anything that required a signature, and he left. It just so happened that Kanika's cousin, who lived very nearby, was coming home that day and saw this delivery guy at Kanika's door. He was described as being a 6-foot-tall black male with a beard, and he was wearing a FedEx uniform shirt. It was either a short-sleeve shirt or the sleeves had been cut off. He was also wearing shorts and Timberland boots. The cousin probably took note of these details because of the fake FBI agent from a few days before, and the cousin also noted that there was no FedEx truck nearby, and they saw him walk away but not get into a vehicle. Kanika called FedEx, and they confirmed that they did not have any package listed as being scheduled for a signed delivery at her apartment. After this incident, Kanika, of course, called her mom, who told her to come home and just stay with her for a few days. Kanika turned down this offer, and then later she was talking to a friend about this delivery guy. Kanika said she had no idea what was going on or why someone was doing this to her. But she noted another weird thing that was happening that she may not have been worried about if not for the men knocking on her door. Kanika had come home from work multiple times and found what she called cigarette butts near her apartment door, and she said they looked like Black and Milds, which I do think is worth noting. First of all, they're not technically cigarettes, they're cigarillos, and I'm clearing this up not to be pedantic, though I understand if you assumed that's what I was doing, because I usually am, but I think it's worth noting because these are not smoked as commonly as cigarettes. So if they are connected to someone watching Kanika, waiting on her doorstep for her, or the men knocking at her door, I think they're worth making a mental note of. I wouldn't convict someone because they smoked these, but if it was in the context of a larger case with more evidence, I could see it being a piece to the puzzle. Kanika's friend, like her mom, pushed Kanika to come stay with her at this point, or at least go somewhere that wasn't her apartment. But Kanika said she just had 2 more days before she was heading out of town for the weekend, and it would be fine. The very next morning, Thursday, August 28th, around 7:30, Kanika called her mom and said she had another person at her house with a package. She didn't answer the door this time, of course, and she called her mom to say how strange it was there was a delivery person trying to deliver a package that early. Things are a little different now, but back in 2008, a delivery at 7:30 in the morning would have been incredibly uncommon, and usually you would know it was something that was being overnighted to you. Kanika's mom said that looking back, she does remember there was some fear in Kanika's voice, and I think it's clear that Kanika was uneasy about what was going on. She kept calling her mom and her friend after all of these incidents, and if she wasn't worried, she wouldn't be calling them. While on the phone with her mom, Kanika said that she wasn't going to go to work that day. She and Melissa were leaving the next day to drive to Atlanta, which is a 10-hour drive each way. So Kanika needed to get her car serviced before she left, and she didn't want to have to do it that night after she got off of work. So she was going to take the day off, get the car taken care of, and run some errands.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all the shows in your favorite venues like Deftones at Madison Square Garden, Eagles at the Sphere, and Foster the People at the Ryman Auditorium. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.
The following ad is sponsored by Pets Best Insurance Services. Your pet is your bestie. Your therapist, your preferred match. It's easy to love them, even when they sneak your snacks. It's easy to protect them, too, with pet insurance coverage from Pets Best. Because it's all fun and games until they chew on something they shouldn't. With perfect timing, Pets Best helps protect your furry friend and your budget from this imperfect world. Get up to 90% on eligible vet bills for less than $1 a day. Find your perfect match at PetsBest.com. Pet insurance products offered and administered by Pets Best Insurance Services, LLC are underwritten by American Pet Insurance Company or Independence American Insurance Company. For all terms, visit PetsBest.com/policy.
Hi, I'm Cindy Crawford, and I'm the founder of Meaningful Beauty. Well, I don't know about you, but I never liked being told, oh, wow, you look so good for your age. Why even bother saying that? Why don't you just say you look great at any age, every age? That's what Meaningful Beauty is all about. We create products that make you feel confident in your skin at the age you are now.
Meaningful Beauty. Beautiful skin at every age. Learn more at meaningfulbeauty.com.
Kanika left her house, did what she needed to do, and then arrived home around 11:50 a.m. We have this timestamp because that's when her neighbors heard a woman yelling, "No, no, no," followed by 4 or 5 gunshots. After it was quiet, one of her neighbors looked out and reported to the police that he could smell the gunpowder as soon as he opened his door. He looked down the stairs and saw Kanika lying on the ground just outside of her apartment. 911 was called and Kanika was transported to the hospital, unresponsive but still alive. Later that night, the doctors ran tests and they determined that she was brain dead. Her family made the decision to donate her kidneys, and Kanika died the day after she was shot, with her family by her side. Meanwhile, the investigation into who did this was ongoing. No one had seen the shooter, but it was determined that he must have been standing at her front door when she approached, and then he opened fire. Kanika's wallet and keys, which she had been holding, fell by her body and were left untouched. This ruled out robbery as a motive, as did the information about one or more people coming to Kanika's house in the 5 days leading up to the shooting. And that is important to point out. The investigators do not know if the fake FBI agent and the 2 delivery men were all the same person, or 2 people, or even all 3 different people. It doesn't seem like Kanika identified them as looking the same, except that they were all tall black men. But some fake glasses and maybe even a fake beard can do quite a bit to disguise the appearance of someone she was only seeing through a peephole. Even if they weren't all one person, it's more likely than not that they were working together and were stalking her. But this is not someone Kanika recognized, which brings the motive into question. Because Kanika had a top secret government security job, of course, it was floated that maybe Kanika's murder was linked to her work. But how or why? If the killer wanted information from her, they didn't get any. They didn't steal anything from her apartment or scurry away with documents she had. If she was working on a job that would potentially make her a target, then why wouldn't Kanika have put together those pieces when all these strange men or strange man started showing up at her door? Taking just one step into this theory left me with more questions than answers. But I'll say that this theory got a boost in the months after Kanika's murder when a man with a top secret security clearance was also murdered in Maryland. Shan Nicholas Green was born in August of 1977 to Carolyn and Stephen Green, and he was one of 4 children. He grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, and got into computers when he was just a teen. He worked doing IT for a school district before he even completed his degree, and then Shan got a job that required top secret security clearance at the National Counterterrorism Center. Shan's exact job was less hush-hush than Kanika's because he didn't work directly in security. His job was essentially to keep the systems that stored the top secret information up and running. Shan described himself as a square, and he liked a quiet, family-oriented life. Though he wasn't married with his own children, he was very involved in the lives of his 8 nephews and 1 niece. He spent most of his Saturdays bouncing between their various sporting events and school plays, birthday parties, award ceremonies. He attended them all. On Wednesday, November 12th, 2008, 31-year-old Shan was driving away from his apartment in Oxon Hill, Maryland, and it's believed he was heading to the gym. It was around 5:30 when he stopped at a red light, and a man wearing a mask walked up to Shan's car and fired 9 times right at him, killing him at the scene. It seemed so unlikely that Shan, a man who read the Bible on his lunch breaks and spent all of his spare time with his family, would have done anything to become the victim of such a targeted crime. But there was no other obvious motive. The man didn't try to steal his car. He was on foot, and he was wearing a mask to purposely disguise who he was, so it didn't seem like this was a road rage incident where, in a moment of extreme anger, he just opened fire. It seemed like Shan was targeted, with no indication of why. When Shan's case hit the news, Kanika's family started getting contacted by others who saw the news coverage and noted some similarities. Both appeared to be targeted in broad daylight. Both lived lives that didn't really invite much hatred. They were both single, lived alone, grew up in Maryland, and they both had top secret security clearance. That said, it doesn't sound like their jobs overlapped at all. Their jobs were 30 miles apart, and that's in DC traffic, so we're talking an hour or more. And they didn't even live near each other. If you know how Maryland sort of wraps around DC, Kanika lived north of DC and Shan lived south. Again, they're 25 miles apart, but through DC traffic and with that many people, their circles wouldn't overlap much. And the truth is that a lot of people who live within 30, 45, even 60 minutes of Washington, D.C. have government jobs or government-adjacent jobs, and they have some type of security clearance. Linking the fact that they both had security clearance is kind of like saying 2 people in Silicon Valley do work on the internet. It is just the regional job market. It doesn't sound like the authorities think the cases are connected. Unfortunately, there has not been much about Shan's case in the media, and the only lead I saw that was ever made public was that there was someone else living in Shan's apartment complex who drove a nearly identical car. Because Shan was so close to home at the time he was shot, what if the killer was actually waiting on the other guy, and it was a case of misidentification? Now, we know that's not what happened in Kanika's case because the man or men who were coming to her door were using her name. And that leads to the next breaking news story that people wondered if it was connected to Kanika. There was a man named Jason Scott who was arrested in 2009 and charged with multiple home invasion murders. He had worked for UPS, and he used the information he got from his work to target people for break-ins. He is suspected of killing 5 different women, all Black women, in Prince George's County. Though he was a few years younger than Kanika, I saw some reporting that said that Jason Scott actually attended the same high school she did. In the end, Scott ended up taking an Alford plea on 2 of the murders, which meant he did not concede guilt, but he did accept that the government had enough to convict him, and in exchange, the other charges were dropped. He ended up being sentenced to 80-something years in prison. Jason Scott was interviewed about Kanika's case, but there isn't a lot that connected him. His crimes were in a different part of the county, and he broke into the homes. Stalking and killing someone without getting something else out of it wasn't really his MO. Jason Scott had also studied up on how to not get caught, and he used arson and/or bleach at his crime scenes to get rid of evidence. We do not see that in Kanika's case based on what has been released. It seems that Jason Scott being employed by a delivery company is the connection here, but it didn't go anywhere. And that is largely what we knew about the case until 2023 when that Unsolved Mysteries podcast came out. This is the first time we heard about Kanika's new friend group and that she was dating anyone. It also came out that the woman Kanika was linked to had an ex-boyfriend who people said was very much not happy about her relationship with Kanika. Judy had not heard Kanika mention anything about that, but after Kanika's death, she did hear from some of Kanika's friends that this man would give them weird looks when they were out, and he was jealous of the relationship. Judy told Unsolved Mysteries that the first time she heard about this guy was at the hospital after Kanika had been shot. So this was a very, very early lead that just hadn't been made public until 2023. And this is why on my podcast, I'm so often qualifying things I say with based on what's been released. Because with these unsolved cases, there is so much holdback information. I imagine investigators, if they had the time to listen, would laugh at the things I say or even conclusions I make because they know so much more information. And I actually sort of had this happen last week. I mean, no one was laughing at me, but I was discussing the Oakley Carlson case with one of the advocates who is pretty close to the situation. I made a comment and she was like, well, hold on there because there's a lot going on. And the situation that I was distilling down to a harsh comment about the legal proceedings was a lot more complex than I knew or appreciated. But let's get back to Kanika's case and the likelihood that she was targeted by someone she knew, or at least someone who knew her. And to do that, we need to just look at her final day. Kanika was someone who was very reliable and she stuck to a routine. But on this day, she varied what she normally did and took the day off of work, which was not common. So someone who was not close to her but knew her movements would have assumed she would have been at work that day. So why were they at her doorstep waiting for her, ready to shoot at not even noon? Let's say they were watching her and they saw her leave. Why didn't they assume that she was heading to work and wouldn't be home till much later? So was it possible that she told someone other than her mother that she was taking the day off to get her car serviced? We know she would have told her work, so her coworkers would have known. That's a lead. And this is the sort of thing you would tell the person you were taking a road trip with. And if that person, Melissa, knew, maybe she mentioned it to someone else, even benignly. But maybe that person meant Kanika harm. Kanika's mother, Judy, has noted that Kanika had no problems in her life before she started hanging out with this new group, and then she was killed the day before she was supposed to go away for the weekend with someone from that group. Was this someone trying to stop her from going away with Melissa? Maybe this was someone who wanted her permanently out of Melissa's life. One of Kanika's friends from childhood remembered that none of the new friends came to the hospital, and she didn't remember any of them at the funeral either. No one heard from any of them after Kanika's death. But with all that said, the official stance of the investigation is that they have no persons of interest. But that hasn't stopped Kanika's loved ones from wondering and suspecting. So if you have any information on the murders of Kanika Powell or Shan Green, you can contact the Prince George's County Crime Solvers. For some reason, neither Kanika nor Shan are listed on their unsolved homicide list, even though Prince George's County appears to be the investigating agency. I'll leave a link to all that information in the show notes.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all the shows in your favorite venues like Deftones at Madison Square Garden, Eagles at the Sphere, and Foster the People at the Ryman Auditorium. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.
50 years ago, a young woman named Karen Silkwood got into her car alone.
She was reportedly on her way to deliver sensitive documents to a New York Times reporter.
She never made it, and those documents she'd agreed to carry were never found.
Do you think somebody killed her?
There's no question in my mind that someone killed her that night. I think they were trying to stop her in order to get the documents.
A new investigation into the life and death of America's first nuclear whistleblower.
Listen to Radioactive, the Karen Silkwood Mystery from ABC Audio. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.